10th, 2011. Now, before I jump into the news, I'm going to go ahead and mention my YouTube channel, which is suncoastnews.net. That's suncoastnews, one word, .net. Please visit that when you have a chance. And now for the news. There was a story that I read earlier. I actually found it on Drudge's site, and the title of it is India and Iran Mull Over Gold for Oil Agreement. Basically, the two countries are coming to an arrangement where India will buy oil from Iran, as they've been doing for quite some time, not in a currency, but actually for gold. And this is something that the two countries have been trying to work on for the last few months, and they're trying to actually finalize this deal. And one of the reasons that they're doing this is they want to cut out using dollars for the transaction, or the petrodollar, the U.S. dollar. So if this actually goes through, it's just going to be one more big blow to the dollar, because it will decrease demand and the usage of the dollar, which will thus decrease its value. So that's something that we should definitely be following, because this isn't the first significant development where the petrodollar is being shunned or being countries trying to get away from it. A few weeks ago, there was an announcement by China and Russia that they were going to work out all bilateral trade deals, or their bilateral deals in oil with their own currencies. They were going to create some kind of basket between the two currencies so that way they could get around from using the dollar. This doesn't bode well for the U.S. dollar, because it seems that this trend is just going to continue, and in turn it's going to decrease the dollar's attractiveness, which will decrease its value. And I think that in the future we're going to be seeing a lot more of this bartering types of agreements where countries aren't necessarily going to be using even other currencies. They're going to be trading back and forth. Shortly after the nationalists came to power in Germany, this is during the 30s, they had worked agreements where, like with Argentina, for example, they would trade locomotives. Germany would trade locomotives to Argentina, and Argentina would send Germany cattle or beef or any kind of item, and they would do this to cut out the use of any type of paper or fiat currency. This actually helped both countries involved, because it got them around dealing with currencies, and it made the transactions much easier to do in many cases. So I imagine that we'll be seeing a greater trend towards that in the future.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." The truth is about the Middle East is, had there been no oil there, it would be like Africa. Nobody is threatening to intervene in Africa. The problem is the opposite. We keep asking for people to intervene and stop it. And there's no question that the presence of petroleum throughout the region has sparked great power involvement. Whether that was the specific motivation for the coup or not, I can't tell you, but there's always been this attitude that somehow we could intervene and use force in the region.
Well, more speculation has been raised on the reasons for NATO's intervention in Libya. And as RT's Laura Emmett reports, the organisation may have been trying to prevent Gaddafi from burying the American buck. Oh!
According to some, it's about protecting civilians.
We must not tolerate this regime using military force against its own people.
Others say it's about oil.
The only reason they're interested with Libya is about the oil. You'd think we'd be in Iraq if the major export there was broccoli.
But some are convinced intervention in Libya is all about currency, specifically Gaddafi's plan to introduce the gold dinar, a single African currency made from gold, a true sharing of the wealth.
It's one of these things that you have to plan almost in secret, because as soon as you say you're going to change over from the dollar to something else, you're going to be targeted. There were two conferences on this. One in '96 and another one in the year 2000, called the World Mataba Conference, organised by Gaddafi. And everybody was interested. I think most countries in Africa were keen.
Gaddafi didn't give up. In the months leading up to the military intervention, he called on African and Muslim nations to join together to create this new currency that would rival the dollar and euro. They would sell oil and other resources around the world only for gold dinars. It's an idea that would shift the economic balance of the world. Countries' wealth would depend on how much gold they have, not how many dollars they trade. And Libya has 144 tons of gold. The UK has double that, but 10 times the population.
If Gaddafi had an intent to try to reprice his oil or whatever else the country was selling in the global markets and accept something else as a currency, or maybe launch a gold dinar currency, any move such as that would certainly not be welcomed by the power elite today who are responsible for controlling the world's central banks. So yes, that would certainly be something that would cause his immediate dismissal and the need for other reasons to be brought forth for removing him from power.
It's happened before. In 2000, Saddam Hussein announced Iraqi oil would be traded in euros, not dollars. Sanctions and an invasion followed. Some say because the Americans were desperate to prevent OPEC from transferring oil trading in all its member countries to the euro. The UK's gold is kept here in a secure vault somewhere in the depths of the Bank of England. As in most developed countries, there's not enough to go around. But that's not the case in places like Libya and many of the Gulf states. A gold dinar would have given oil-rich African and Middle Eastern countries the power to turn around to their energy-hungry customers and say, sorry, the price has gone up and we want gold. Some say the US and its NATO allies literally couldn't afford to let that happen. Laura Emmett, RT, London.
The dollar loses its status as a world reserve currency. That is the pillar that underpins American supremacy. Then the military pillar, which is the other pillar of American supremacy, will fall away as well.
That supremacy is also reliant on the ordinary man and woman in the street continuing to buy in US dollars.
It's American consumers who have unwittingly sown the seeds for this conspiracy. Americans are among the biggest spenders and the worst savers in the world. Buy now and pay later seems to be their motto. US national debt is now $7.7 trillion, and the entire debt of the whole country is an incredible $43 trillion. The average American now spends a record amount of their money just paying off the interest on all their loans. So if the petrodollar collapses and interest rates rise, the bubble will burst, and then the stage is set for national bankruptcy.
If that happened, that would really be catastrophic for the dollar. It would be bad enough just to have a switch into the euro, little by little, but if there was any big switch of these trillions of dollars accumulated in U.S. investment, it would really be catastrophic for the U.S. economy. We may be set back more or less permanently.
When you have that many dollars unleashed, you would have massive devaluation, massive inflation. The whole world economic order would be changed, and the United States would really be in a world of hurt.
Teetering on the knife edge of financial meltdown, the US has always needed to keep a firm hand on the trading of its oil dollars. But in November 2000, the most serious attack on the sacred dollar was about to take place. If left unchecked, it could have been an economic Pearl Harbor. After years of struggling under crippling sanctions, Saddam Hussein decided to use the one WMD that no one had ever looked for or even thought about, the euro.
There was a guy once named Saddam Hussein who said, you know, I'm kind of mad the United States bombing me, and Britain too, so I'm going to sell oil in the euros. Came out and said that in the fall of 2000. It's a big secret here in the United States.
With the mighty dollar's position as the world #1 suddenly under threat, did a ripple of fear go through the Bush administration?
From 2001 to the very beginning of the war, Iraq exported about 3.3 billion barrels of oil. We bought 2.5 of those billion. We bought 2/3 of the oil, but we had to pay in euros. We couldn't have the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve cannot print euros, so we have to sell GMs to Europe to get the euros, or whatever we sell to Europe for goods and services in order to get the euros to buy the oil from Iraq. So the petrodollar recycling system began to break down.
So according to this theory, Saddam Hussein signed his own death warrant.
According to a new WikiLeaks article, China has taken a portion of their gigantic foreign holdings and shifted it away from the US dollar into gold. The move is expected to raise the ire of America. They intend to weaken the gold's function as an international reserve currency. They don't want to see other countries turning to gold reserves instead of the US dollar or euro, stated the 2009 cable, quoting Chinese Radio International. China's increased gold reserves will thus act as a model and lead other countries towards reserving more gold. This move is being combined with China's plan to make its currency fully convertible for trading on international markets by 2015. Right now, there is a great amount of difficulty in making the conversion because of high government policy. China currently doesn't own much gold for its economic size. It has about 1,054 tons, according to the World Gold Council, making it the 6th largest holder of gold in the entire world. By buying the gold and making the yuan convertible internationally, China will weaken the US dollar as the world's currency reserve, undermining the dominant global position the US holds in finance now. The weakening of the US dollar's global power would make it much more difficult for the US to borrow money and to run a perpetual trade and budget deficit. This is how it was explained by Al Jazeera. As a reserve currency, the US dollar is the default for international transactions. If, for example, a South Korean company wants to buy wine from Chile, chances are they will carry out the transaction in dollars. Both companies must then purchase dollars to conduct their business, leading to greater demand. The value of global commodities such as oil is also generally demarcated in US dollars. Being a reserve currency allows the U.S. to borrow at low interest rates as central banks around the world are eager to buy U.S. government debt. Any country that can finance its expenditures by printing money or selling bonds is essentially getting a free lunch. If China takes even a portion of America's position as the world reserve currency, it would have tremendous effects on the U.S. debt held by foreign countries. The American debt rating would begin to decline as the dollar had less strength. It would also mean that it would become harder for the U.S. to pay back the debt it already owes. This is a real danger that this could sink the U.S. dollar completely. This move by China, which does threaten U.S. interests, should not be unexpected. After all, they do hold $3 trillion in reserve, according to Xinhua News Agency, and $1.2 trillion of U.S. government debt as of June 30th, 2011, according to the San Francisco Chronicle. This is a very dangerous amount to hold. A default of the U.S. dollar could potentially destroy the entire Chinese economy. China's reaction is excellent. Diversify the debt being held and increase the power of your own currency at the same time. By buying gold is the smart thing to do with American debt. As America reaches closer to outright bankruptcy, the value of gold keeps increasing. This gold is worth more than American money. I think what we see here with China is a continuing trend towards toppling America as the world's controller of finances, using its currency as a mechanism. Much of the violence in the Middle East and Africa stems from challenges to U.S. power. Before the invasion of Iraq, Saddam Hussein began a policy of accepting euro currency for the sale of oil. The U.S. began to panic, thinking that this trend would continue. They had to stop the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries from following the Ba'athist Iraq's lead to overthrowing the oppressive dominance of the U.S. dollar currency. This new war in Libya is not really any different. Muammar Gaddafi began a policy of encouraging the purchase of their oil with gold, thereby bypassing the U.S. dollar, making it more profitable for them. The African Union, on the advice of Gaddafi, began looking into their own currency for trade, one that would be based on a gold Libyan dinar currency. This is what caused the U.S. to invade Libya using the so-called rebels. The Europeans, however, did not want to be left out of any future profits to be made, thus they joined in. The Third World, particularly the Middle East and Africa, are beginning to challenge the authority and domination of U.S. imperialism. These peoples know that the only path to liberation is to throw off the shackles of First World exploitation by the U.S. China no doubt sees this trend and is making their own play for world reserve currency.
Speaker, our government intervention in the economy, the private affairs of citizens, and the internal affairs of foreign countries leads to uncertainty and many unintended consequences. Here are some of the consequences about which we should be concerned. I predict U.S. taxpayers will pay to rebuild Palestine, both the West Bank and the Gaza, as well as Afghanistan. U.S. taxpayers paid to bomb these areas, so we will be expected to rebuild them. Peace of sorts will come to the Middle East, but will be short-lived. There will be big promises of more U.S. money and weapons flowing to Israel and to Arab countries allied with the United States. U.S. troops and others will be used to monitor the peace. In time, an oil boycott will be imposed, with oil prices soaring to historic highs. Current Israeli-United States policies will solidify Arab-Muslim nations in their effort to avenge the humiliation of the Palestinians. This will include those Muslim nations that in the past have fought against each other. Some of our moderate Arab allies will be overthrown by Islamic fundamentalists. The UN will continue to condemn through resolutions Israeli-U.S. policies in the Middle East, and they will be ignored. Some European countries will clandestinely support the Muslim countries and their anti-Israel pursuits. China, ironically assisted by American aid, much more openly will sell the militant Muslims the weapons they want and will align herself with the Arab nations. The United States, with Tony Blair as head cheerleader, will attack Iraq without proper authority, and a major war, the largest since World War II, will result. Major moves will be made by China, India, Russia, and Pakistan in Central Asia to take advantage of the chaos for the purpose of grabbing land, resources, and strategic advantages sought after for years. The Karzai government will fail and U.S. military presence will end in Afghanistan. An international dollar crisis will dramatically boost interest rates in the United States. Price inflation with a major economic downturn will decimate U.S. federal government finances and exploding deficits and uncontrolled spending. Federal Reserve policy will continue at an expanding rate with massive credit expansion, which will make the dollar crisis worse. Gold will be seen as an alternative to paper money as it returns to its historic role as money. Erosion of civil liberties here at home will continue as our government responds to political fear in dealing with the terrorist threat by making generous use of the powers obtained with the Patriot Act. Many American military personnel and civilians will be killed in the coming conflict. The leaders of whichever side loses the war will be hauled into and tried before the International Criminal Court for war crimes. The United States will lose the war, but neither will we win. Our military and political leaders will not be tried by the International Criminal Court. The Congress and the President will shift radically toward expanding the size and scope of the federal government. This will satisfy both the liberals and the conservatives. Military and police powers will grow, satisfying the conservatives. The welfare state, both domestic and international, will expand, satisfying the liberals. Both sides will endorse military adventurism overseas. This is the most important of my predictions. Policy changes could prevent all of the previous predictions from occurring. Unfortunately, that will not occur. In due course, the Constitution will continue to be steadily undermined and the American Republic further weakened. During the next decade, the American people will become poorer and less free, while they become more dependent on the government for economic security. The war will prove to be divisive, with emotions and hatred growing between the various factions and special interests that drive our policies in the Middle East. Agitation from more class warfare will succeed in dividing us domestically. And believe it or not, I expect lobbyists will thrive more than ever during the dangerous period of chaos. I have no timetable for these predictions, but just in case, keep them around and look at them in 5 to 10 years. Let's hope and pray that I'm wrong on all accounts. If so, I will be very pleased.
Gentleman has expired.